London, 1998. This wasn't a London of flashing lights and roaring traffic, the one that never sleeps. Back then, the city breathed slower, its streets calmer, its nights quieter. But that calm shattered the moment. A strange call echoed through the police hotline. A woman's voice, trembling yet urgent, warned an impending murder. Not in London, but in India. She pleaded with them to intervene, to stop it before it was too late. They didn't. And what followed wasn't just a crime. It was a nightmare, one that bled across borders, shaking not only London, but the very soul of India. A murder that could have been prevented had someone just listened. This isn't just a story. It's a wound that never healed. A tale so cruel, so twisted, it might make you question everything. Faith, family, love, humanity itself. It's the story of family that smiled in public, but its secret's darker than any London alley. It's the story of a young girl named Surjeet Kaur. It's the story of the most brutal betrayal. She looked at me once and whispered. Surjeet was taken in a jeep. She was drugged. She was strangled. Her body was tossed into a river, like she never mattered. But here's the most haunting part. Surjeet wasn't just a victim. Some say she was a murderer too. Surjeet Kaur grew up in London, but her roots were buried deep in Punjab. Her parents had crossed oceans, but their mindset never left the soil of their homeland. They raised her not like a London girl, but like a daughter of tradition. Her clothes, her speech, her steps, all watched, all controlled. Live like a proper Punjabi girl, they told her every single day. She was allowed to go to school, but only until it suited them. When she turned 16, everything changed. Her parents made a decision. Without her voice, without her consent, a marriage was arranged, as if her life was a transaction. But Surjeet wasn't ready to vanish. She stood up, looked him in the eye, and said the words that would seal her fate. "No, I don't want to get married. I want to study," she had whispered once. "I want to build a future for myself." But her words, like leaves in the wind, were swept aside, ignored, dismissed, forgotten. No one listened. Her dreams were too loud for a family that only valued silence. So they shut her voice down the only way they knew how, by forcing her into marriage. Her groom? Sukhdev Singh, a man from Punjab, now settled in the UK. On paper, he was a perfect match. Same roots, same community. But what did that matter when the bride didn't even want a wedding? Surjeet met Sukhdev's family only once. Brief, cold, formal. She was just 16, a child dressed as a bride, still figuring out who she was, and already being asked to forget it under the crushing weight of parental expectations. She gave in. She wore the dress, smiled in the photos, and stepped into a future she never chose. That future was waiting behind the doors of her in-laws' home, a house with 4 people and 1 ruler. Back on Kaur Atwal, known in the community as a religious woman who led devotional singing groups. But inside her home, she was a tyrant cloaked in tradition, controlling, cruel, unquestioned. Even her grown sons didn't dare defy her. Sukhdev Singh, the older son, became Surjeet's husband. Hardev Singh, the younger one, watched from the shadows. In that suffocating household, Surjeet was now the 5th member. But to them, she wasn't family. She was a servant. From the very first day, her life was no less than a punishment. She didn't know how to cook. No one had taught her how to clean. But instead of helping her learn, her mother-in-law chose violence over patience. Every small mistake invited scolding or slaps. The housemaids were let go. The chores? All hers. Morning till night, the fire in the kitchen was the only warmth she ever knew. And when she turned to her husband, desperate for protection, his words were colder than any silence. "I will do whatever my mother says." Soon, he too began hitting her. She hid the bruises at first, hid the pain behind 4 smiles. But wounds scream when hearts can't. And one day, unable to carry the weight alone, she ran to her parents and broke down. She told him everything, every blow, every insult, every cruel dawn spent begging for kindness. But their response shattered her all over again. This happens after marriage, Beta. It'll get better. Once you have a child, your husband will change. Even your mother-in-law will soften. They sent her back into the very fire she was trying to escape. 6 months later, her father-in-law died. The house turned quieter, colder. And then in 1991, something shifted. Surjeet gave birth to a baby boy. For the first time in years, her lips curled into a soft, hopeful smile. Maybe now things will change. Maybe now they'll see me as more than a burden. But what followed was even darker. But instead of getting better, life turned crueler. Motherhood, for most, is a time of love and bonding. For Surjeet, it became another prison. Her mother-in-law's rage grew colder, sharper, and the newborn in her arms, her only source of light, became the very reason that light was dimmed further. No one helped, not her husband, not the woman who ruled the house. Surjeet was left completely alone, with a baby in one arm and a mountain of chores in the other. Nights without sleep, days without pause. She cooked, cleaned, bathed the child, and soothed his cries while hiding her own. And God forbid the baby cried at night. One whimper would bring back encore storming into the room like thunder. "Shut him up," she would scream, shattering whatever peace Surjeet tried to build. There was no tenderness, no understanding, not even the kindness that is owed to a mother. Even after giving birth, Surjeet remained invisible, unloved, unprotected. You see, in many families, cruelty wears a mask. To the outside world, they look like the perfect religious household, respectable, traditional, smiling at temple gatherings, quoting scriptures, singing hymns. But behind those closed doors, they were breaking a young girl piece by piece. In 1992, Sukhdev's younger brother Hardev got married. His bride, Surjeet, was a gentle, sweet soul from another Sikh family in England. Innocent, trusting, she entered the house with hope in her heart, just like Surjeet once had. But it didn't take long. A few days in that home were enough. Surjeet saw through the facade, the fake smiles, the empty rituals. And soon, she too became a victim of the same cold-hearted cruelty. The Atwal family didn't welcome daughters-in-law. They broke them, slowly, quietly. Years passed. Pain settled like dust on every corner of Surjeet's life, until one day she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. "If I keep living like this," she thought, "I'll go mad." She needed air, space, something, anything, to remind her she was still alive. So, with trembling courage, she made a decision. She would work, even if they disapproved, even if they tried to stop her. In secret, she began searching. And one day, fate answered back. She got a job at Heathrow Airport, a customs agent, a role that gave her something she hadn't felt in years: freedom. For those 8 hours a day, Surjeet felt human again. Outside that house, she wasn't a servant. She wasn't someone's punching bag. She was herself. And slowly, as she opened up to her coworkers, her truth began to unravel. She told them everything. The beatings, the silence, the way love was used like a weapon. And they all said the same thing. "Why are you still there? You have a job, a child. You deserve peace. Leave. Quietly, just go." And those words, they sank deep into her soul, like seeds of future she hadn't dared to imagine. One day, without a single word to anyone, Surjeet wrapped her baby in thin shawl, held him tightly to her chest, and ran. She didn't look back, not even once. For the first time in her life, she was choosing herself. She found a small room to rent near the airport where she worked, and just like that, Surjeet Kaur began a life on her own. No chains, no screaming voices, just her and her child, and a fragile hope that maybe, just maybe, she could start over. But peace has a cruel way of slipping away from women like her. Sukhdev Singh didn't let her go so easily. He began showing up at her door, banging, shouting, demanding she come back. He made scenes in the street, argued in front of neighbors, and tried to shame her into returning. Eventually, exhausted and worn down, Surjeet agreed, but with one condition. I'll return, but not to that house. Not to your mother. Just you, me, and our child. We need our own place. To her shock, Sukhdev agreed. He even spoke to Bakhan Kaur, and within weeks bought a house, right next door to the old one. Surjeet moved back in, not for love, not for trust, for her child. And because part of her still believed people could change, she kept her job, held her head high, and tried to rebuild something broken. But the past has a way of creeping in. Sukhdev hadn't changed. If anything, he was worse. The fact that Surjeet worked outside the home now became a trigger for his insecurities. He started accusing her of seeing other men, of dishonoring him. The poisonous suspicion seeped into every corner of their life. Then in 1997, Surjeet became pregnant again. Another child. Another chance, she thought. But instead of joy, she received cruelty. Is this even my child? Sukhdev spat, and those words shattered her. But it didn't stop with him. The entire Atwal family began treating her like a stranger, like filth. Their new home, which was meant to be a sanctuary, turned into a second prison. Alone again, Surjeet found comfort where she could, in the friendships she had built at the airport, in quiet moments, in shared smiles and understanding eyes. And slowly, one of those friendships deepened. A kind young man saw her pain, listened to her heart, and gave her something she hadn't felt in years, gentle love. But she didn't know that while she was trying to breathe, Sukhdev had begun following her, secretly, obsessively. He discovered the affair. He didn't cry. He didn't confront her like a broken man. He went to his mother, to the Atwal family. This wasn't betrayal. This was war. They saw Surjeet's love, her desire for freedom, as an insult to their honor, a stain that needed scrubbing out with blood. And so the meeting was called. Behind closed doors, in hushed whispers, a decision was made. Bakhan Kaur, Sukhdev Singh, Hardev Singh, Surjeet, Hardev's wife, all present, all silent, all complicit. In that room, Bakhan Kaur declared, she wants to leave us for another man, then she dies before she gets the chance. She had already made arrangements, a contact in India, a plan, a price, and one by one they agreed. Most eager of all, her own husband. Sukhdev didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. He wanted her dead, not divorced, dead. Only one person trembled, Surjeet, Hardev's wife. She wanted to scream, to run to Surjeet and warn her, but fear chained her voice. Fear of Bakhan's wrath, fear of what her own husband might do. And the very next day, Bakhan Kaur smiled sweetly, called Surjeet home, and the trap began to close. With a sugar-coated smile, Bakhan Kaur approached Surjeet, her voice dripping with false warmth. There are 2 weddings in India, she said sweetly. I'm going, and as my eldest daughter-in-law, you should come with me. We've never shared a journey together. Let this be the first. Then came the lie that sealed Surjeet's fate. You want a divorce from my son? That's fine. Come with me to India. When we return, I promise, you'll have your freedom. But let's keep this quiet from the relatives for now. After years of fighting, hurting, hoping, Surjeet believed her. She thought this trip was her way out. A final chapter before a new beginning. The flights were booked. Departure on December 3rd. Return on the 18th. Everything looked normal. But beneath that calm surface, evil stirred. Bakhan Kaur had already made a plan. And the plan was simple. Take Surjeet to India. Kill her there. And bury the shame once and for all. One person knew. Surjeet, the youngest daughter-in-law, had overheard enough to put the pieces together. The fear began to rot her from the inside. One night, her hands trembling, she begged her husband Hardev to stop his mother, to save Surjeet's life. But Hardev only scoffed. "Stay out of it," he said coldly when she pressed again. He threatened her. Surjeet went silent, but her heart was screaming. Then came the morning of December 3rd, 1998. Bags were packed. The car was ready. But the weight in Surjeet's chest had become unbearable. She couldn't live with the guilt, so she did the only thing she could. She slipped out of the house unnoticed, drove far beyond her neighborhood, and stopped at a lonely phone booth. There, from behind the glass, she made a desperate call to Crime Stoppers, a UK group that allowed anonymous reports. Her voice was tight with panic. "I want to report something before it happens," she whispered. She gave them everything: the names, the flight number, the plan. Hours later, from behind her curtain, Surjeet watched with tears running down her face as Surjeet left the airport. Smiling, unaware, she hugged her daughter, kissed her baby one last time, and got into the car with her killer. Bakan Kaur sat beside her, pretending to be a mother. With them gone, Surjeet found the courage to do more. She wrote an anonymous letter to the police, giving every detail she knew, everything except her own name. She couldn't risk it. If Bakan could arrange one murder, she could easily arrange another. But silence answered her cries. No call, no visit, no action. Maybe the letter never reached them. Or maybe no one cared. December 18th came. The flight landed, and Bakan Kaur stepped off, alone. When neighbors asked, "Where's Surjeet?" she smiled again. She's enjoying her time in Punjab. Stayed a little longer. But to those more persistent, Bakan spun a darker tale. She claimed Surjeet had fallen in love with a man in India, that she'd run off to Delhi, that she didn't care about her children anymore, not even about their school fees. Now, Sukhdev has no choice, she said. He must divorce her. But not everyone believed her. On December 21st, Surjeet's brother, Jagdish Singh, went to the Metropolitan Police and reported her missing. That's when the investigation finally began. Then, in January 1999, something cracked. Surjeet was alone in the house with Bakan Kaur. The silence between them felt like glass about to shatter. And then, out of nowhere, Bakan began to speak. Not with guilt, not with sorrow, but with cold justification. "Maybe I shouldn't say this," she muttered, "but that girl was ruining our family's name. People were talking. Something had to be done." Surjeet stared at her, then asked the question that haunted her nights. "Where's Surjeet?" Bakan's answer was quiet, chilling, and matter-of-fact. "We reached Delhi. My brother Darshan came to pick us up. After 2 weddings, Surjeet wanted to go shopping. I gave her money. Darshan and his friend got the Jeep ready. She got in. The next words were sharp enough to stop the heart. They gave her water. It was drugged. She fainted. They strangled her, took her jewelry, and dumped her body into the river Ravi. That was it. Over. No one will ever know. But now someone did know. Surjeet. What she chose to do next would define everything. And while she stood trembling, others refused to give up. Surjeet's friend Jane and her brother Jagdish went from office to office, demanding justice, begging the British Foreign Office to start an investigation in Punjab. Then, in February 1999, the final betrayal came. Sukhdev Singh, her husband, her executioner, tried to claim her £100,000 life insurance. The claim was denied, so he turned to the court instead, filing for divorce. And in that courtroom, he told the same lie. She ran away. In May of 2000, London police finally arrested Bakan Kaur, suspecting her of planning Surjeet's murder. But after just 1 day of questioning, she walked free, no charges filed. The case seemed to hit a dead end. As a last hope, The authorities announced a £10,000 reward for any information about Surjeet's disappearance. Still, the years rolled by in silence. But Surjeet's family and friends never gave up. They kept pushing, writing letters, knocking on doors, pleading with British politicians for justice. Meanwhile, Surjeet, trapped inside the Atwell household, was drowning. Her life had become unbearable. Every escape attempt failed. In 2004, after years of abuse, she finally broke, a complete mental collapse that landed her in the hospital. It was only after her release, while staying with her warden, that she finally opened up. For the first time, she told her father the full, terrible truth about what had happened to Surjeet. With his support, Surjeet went to the police and gave an official statement. That moment changed everything. In 2005, British authorities reopened the case. Investigators flew to India, tracking leads, gathering evidence, questioning suspects who had long believed they were safe. Then, in August 2006, the turning point came. Bakon Cow and her son Sukdev Atwal were arrested for the murder of Surjeet. In 2007, the trial began in Old Delhi. Surjeet stood tall in court for over 3 days, telling everything she had buried inside for years. Her voice shook the courtroom. She became the first British woman to testify in an honor-killing case against her own family. And because of her courage, Bakon Cow and Sukdev were sentenced to life in prison. But the story doesn't end with full justice. The two men who physically carried out the murder, Bakon's brother Darian Singh and his associate, were never punished. They still walk free in India, untouched by the law. Today, Surjeet's life looks very different. She left Hardev. She found peace, raising her 4 children on her own. She became a police officer, then later retired. She even wrote a book, one that tells both her story and Surjeet's, ensuring the world will never forget. Surjeet also founded True Honor, an organization that fights domestic violence and gives women the second chances they deserve. This wasn't just a story. It was a warning, a reckoning, and above all, a woman's voice refusing to stay silent ever again.